At my aunt's 65th birthday, I walked in carrying the dessert I purchased. Then my brother laughed. "Oh look, the family ATM finally arrived." My cousin said, "The one who contributes the most but matters least." Even Aunt said, "Don't cause drama. It's her 65th. So I left, dropped the receipt, and walked out. 28M, never thought a birthday party would be the moment everything changed, but here we are. The drive to my aunt's house felt different that evening. I'd spent 40 minutes in traffic, clutching the steering wheel while the expensive chocolate cake from that boutique bakery sat in the passenger seat. $300 for a custom cake seemed excessive, but it was her 65th birthday, and I wanted it to be special. The same way I'd wanted every family gathering to be special for the past 5 years. My phone buzzed with the usual pre-party messages. My brother asking if I could cover the wine since he was a bit short this month. My cousin wondering if I could help with the catering costs because you know how tight things are. The same requests that had become as routine as breathing. I transferred the money without question, like always. Walking up the familiar driveway, I could hear laughter spilling from the backyard. The party was already in full swing. I balanced the cake box carefully, checking my watch. Right on time, as usual. Through the kitchen window, I could see my family gathered around the patio table, animated and happy. For a moment, I felt that warm anticipation of belonging. The back door was unlocked. I stepped through, cake held high, ready to announce my arrival with the dessert that would cap off what I hoped would be a perfect evening. The conversations continued around me as I made my way toward the dessert table. That's when my brother noticed me. His voice cut through the chatter with that particular tone he'd perfected over the years, the one that made everyone turn and look. He announced that the family ATM had finally arrived, his words dripping with mock celebration. The laughter that followed felt like ice water in my veins. My cousin didn't miss a beat. She chimed in about how I was the one who contributed the most, but somehow mattered the least. Her words hit differently because they came with that casual cruelty that only family can deliver, the kind that's wrapped in a smile and passed off as harmless teasing. I stood there, still holding the cake, feeling the weight of every birthday, every holiday, every family emergency where I'd been the solution to their financial problems. The graduation parties I'd funded, the medical bills I'd helped cover, the rent payments I'd quietly handled, all of it reduced to a punchline about being their personal bank. My aunt looked at me with that expression I'd seen too many times, the one that said I was being too sensitive, that I should just take the joke and move on. She reminded me not to cause drama because it was her special day, her 65th birthday that I'd spent weeks planning contributions for. From the venue deposit to the catering to the cake, I was still holding like some kind of offering. The silence stretched as everyone waited for my usual response. The forced laugh, the self-deprecating comment, the gracious acceptance of my role as the family's financial safety net, who should be grateful to be included at all. They expected me to set the cake down, take my usual seat, and pretend their words didn't cut as deep as they did. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket. The receipt for the cake was folded neatly next to the other receipts I'd collected over the past month. The wine my brother had requested, the catering deposit my cousin couldn't cover, the flowers for the centerpieces, the party favors, even the gift I'd bought for my aunt, a piece of jewelry she'd mentioned wanting months ago. I pulled out the cake receipt first. $300 for a custom chocolate cake with hand-piped roses and her name in elegant script. I placed it on the table next to the cake box, the paper making a soft sound against the tablecloth. My brother's laughter died in his throat. Then came the wine receipt. $150 for the bottles currently being poured into their glasses. I set it down with deliberate care. The catering receipt followed. $400 for the spread they'd been enjoying before I arrived. The flower receipt. The party favor receipt. Each piece of paper landed on the table like evidence in a trial they hadn't realized they were attending. My aunt asked what I was doing, her voice tight with the kind of concern that comes when someone realizes their comfortable arrangement might be shifting. I told her I was just sharing some paperwork since everyone seemed so interested in my contributions. My voice was steady, calm even. I'd found a strange peace in this moment of absolute clarity. The gift receipt was last. The necklace had cost more than some people's monthly rent, but I'd bought it because I thought it would make her happy, because I thought my gesture would matter, because I was still operating under the delusion that financial generosity could somehow translate into genuine appreciation. I placed that receipt on top of the others and stepped back. My cousin started to say something about it being a joke, that I was overreacting. My brother tried to laugh it off, suggesting we all just enjoy the party. My aunt's expression had shifted from annoyance to something approaching panic as she calculated the total of the receipts scattered across her birthday table. I told them they were absolutely right. I was the family ATM. I had been for years. But ATMs require a card and a PIN to function, and I was changing both. The cake sat unopened as I walked back through the kitchen. Behind me, I could hear urgent whispers starting, the kind of damage control conversations that happen when people realize they've pushed too far. Someone called my name, but I didn't turn around. My car started on the first try, which felt like a small victory. As I backed out of the driveway, I could see faces in the window, watching me leave. Part of me wondered if they'd cut the cake without me, if they'd managed to salvage the party, if they'd spend the evening talking about how dramatic I was being. But mostly, I felt lighter than I had in years. Update 1. The call started the next morning. My phone buzzed with messages that followed a predictable pattern. First came the guilt trips about ruining my aunt's birthday. Then the justifications about how it was all just harmless family teasing. Finally, the practical concerns about upcoming events and who would handle the financial responsibilities I'd apparently abandoned. My brother called first, his tone a mixture of irritation and disbelief. He wanted to know if I was seriously going to let one joke destroy our family relationships. He reminded me of all the good times we'd shared, conveniently omitting the financial contributions that had made most of those good times possible. I let him talk. When he finished, I asked him a simple question. When was the last time he'd paid for anything at a family gathering? The silence stretched long enough for both of us to know the answer. My cousin tried a different approach. She called crying, explaining how stressed everyone was about money and how my reaction had made everything worse. She painted a picture of a family struggling to stay connected, with me as the villain who'd abandoned them in their time of need. I listened to her tears and felt something I hadn't expected: relief. For the first time in years, their financial stress wasn't automatically becoming my responsibility. My aunt's call came last, and it was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. She admitted that they'd come to rely on my generosity, perhaps too much. She acknowledged that their comments had been hurtful. But then came the request I'd been waiting for. Could I please reconsider my decision for the sake of family unity? I told her I'd think about it, which was true. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds before realizing that family unity had apparently meant my silent acceptance of being treated as a walking wallet. Update 2. 3 weeks later, my cousin's wedding shower was approaching. The same cousin who delivered that cutting remark about contributing most, but matching least. The family group chat had been buzzing with planning details, but notably absent were any direct requests for my financial contribution. Instead, they'd gotten creative. My mother called to mention how expensive wedding events had become and how worried she was about my cousin's stress levels. My brother sent articles about the rising costs of celebrations, with casual comments about how some family members might need to step up. The indirect approach was almost amusing. They'd learned that direct requests might not work anymore, so they'd shifted to emotional manipulation and guilt-driven hints. It was like watching a familiar dance performed by people who hadn't realized the music had stopped. I decided to attend the shower. Not because I'd forgiven their behavior, but because I was curious to see how they'd handle my presence without the guarantee of my financial support. The venue was smaller than usual. The decorations were simpler. The catering was clearly budget-conscious. For the first time in years, I was seeing what family events looked like when they had to work within actual financial constraints. My cousin approached me early in the event, her smile nervous and overly bright. She thanked me for coming and made small talk about work and weather. What she didn't do was mention money, gifts, or contributions. The conversation felt strange because it was actually about us as people rather than about what I could provide. Halfway through the shower, I overheard my aunt talking to another relative about how they'd had to scale back their plans due to budget constraints. There was no resentment in her voice, just matter-of-fact acceptance. It occurred to me that this might be the first time in years they'd actually planned an event based on what they could afford rather than what they could get me to fund. I left the shower with a gift I'd chosen carefully, a thoughtful but modestly priced item from their registry. Something that showed I cared without opening the floodgates to renewed financial expectations. Update 3. The real test came 6 months later when my brother's son needed emergency dental work. The old me would have received a panic call followed by a request for immediate financial assistance. The new dynamic played out differently. My brother called, but this time he actually asked how I was doing first. We talked for 20 minutes about life, work, and family before he mentioned his son's situation. When he did bring it up, he was careful to frame it as sharing a family concern rather than making a request. I listened to his worry about the costs and the impact on their budget. I offered emotional support and practical advice about payment plans and dental insurance. What I didn't offer was money. The conversation ended without the awkward tension I'd expected. My brother thanked me for listening and said he'd figure something out. For the first time in our adult relationship, he was treating his financial problems as his own responsibility. 2 weeks later, he called with an update. They'd worked out a payment plan with the dentist, and had managed to cover the immediate costs by adjusting their budget and picking up some extra work. His voice carried a pride I hadn't heard before, the satisfaction of solving his own problem. That's when I realized the real damage my years of financial enabling had done. I hadn't just been supporting my family. I'd been robbing them of the opportunity to develop their own problem-solving skills and financial resilience. The family dynamics continued to shift over the following months. Gatherings became smaller, but somehow more genuine. Conversations focused on actual relationships rather than thinly veiled requests for support. People started contributing what they could rather than assuming I'd cover the difference. My aunt's 66th birthday was a potluck dinner at her house. Everyone brought something homemade or store-bought within their means. The cake came from a grocery store bakery and cost $12. It was delicious. As I sat around the table, listening to actual conversations about our lives and interests, I realized something profound had changed. I was no longer the family ATM, but I was finally becoming a family member. The difference was everything. The receipt from that expensive cake still sits in my desk drawer, not as a reminder of their cruelty, but as evidence of my own transformation. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that teach us our true worth isn't measured in dollars contributed, but in the respect we demand and the boundaries we maintain. Looking back, walking out of that birthday party wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity and forcing everyone, including myself, to confront what our relationships had really become. The best part is that what emerged from that confrontation was something more honest and sustainable than what we'd had before. I'm still the same person who wants to help family when they truly need it. But now that help comes with boundaries, respect, and the understanding that love isn't measured by the size of the check I'm willing to write.